Hey everyone, how are you? Hope you're doing really well. Today we're doing a different kind of video. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I hope it does because it's a video that I've been thinking about filming for a really long time. And as you can see in the title, today we're going to be looking at some eyeshadow palettes that are kind of older, at least most of them, but I just can't stop thinking about them. They have been on my wish list for a very long time, but for a reason or another, I haven't purchased them. So yeah, today I want to look at those palettes with you today. But yeah, what are you doing? But first, if you're new here, hi, welcome. You can call me Tanan, and this is my channel. And in this channel, we like to talk about project pans, hauls, me trying a nova, and that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of content, please consider subscribing, and let's start with this video. But yeah, I'm going to be sharing some photos, so I move to the side so I can insert the pictures over here, and let's start with the first palettes. So okay, let's start with the first one. I think we're going to be talking about 10 brands, but around 15 eyeshadows, something like that. I cannot remember the exact number right now. I have my phone over here, so I'll be looking down. And let's start with Colourpop. Colourpop is a low-cost brand, and it's pretty easy for me to get those palettes, so I have a lot of Colourpop on my collection, but for some reason I haven't purchased these two palettes, and I have convinced myself so many times that I don't need them, but I'm still thinking about them. So the first palette that we're going to be talking about, it's the Blowing Smoke palette, and as you can see in the picture, it's a monochromatic gray and black and white palette. And why the hell do I want this palette so badly? Every time that I look to this palette, it's like, I really want it, but I don't use that kind of colors. But I feel like it will be a perfect companion palette, especially for fall and winter. And actually, this palette is sold out right now in Colourpop, so I guess a lot of people think the same, that this palette is perfect for that season. I think in the whole time that I've been doing my makeup, I have only made a gray eye look once, so I know I don't need this, and I have other silvers that I don't use, but I just want this palette so badly. So it's still on my wish list. I don't know if I'm going to end up getting it or not, but there's something about this palette. The next Colourpop palette is the Meant to Be. It's another monochromatic palette. And it's the same story. How often do I use greens and mints? But I don't know, every time that I look at this palette, I feel like I need it. But deep inside me, I know that I don't need this. I don't use greens that often. I have a couple of mints on my collection and I don't use them enough. But I don't know, I feel like especially like the eyeshadows in the lower row, like kind of a more cool tone mint and a darker one that's kind of a military green but a military mint. Those colors especially really calls me, and the reason that I haven't purchased this palette yet, I have heard that at least 3 of the metallics in this palette look exactly the same on the eyes. But even knowing that, I'm still thinking in this palette, maybe I should get the Juvia's Place Mint Quad that they released a little while ago. I'm tempted with that one too, but I don't know why it has the Mint to Be palette from Colourpop, but I'm really drawn to this palette, but I don't think I'm going to purchase it. So let's move on to the next brand, and I think we're going to be talking about some Natasha De Nona palettes. Let's start with this one, the Gold palette. Who gave permission to this palette to be this pretty? This palette, it's so pretty. I've been drawn to this palette since the first time that I saw it in Ali Glein's channel, and it's so freaking pretty, and it looks like they're discontinuing they're going to discontinue this palette, and that's a crime for me. But let's be honest, at least right now in this point of my life, I'm not willing to pay over $100 for an eyeshadow palette, and that's the cost for this palette. And for that reason, basically since the moment that I saw that palette, I knew that that I want to purchase, it's a dupe from Alter Ego. I'll leave the picture over here. So this is the palette that I have on my wish list right now. And for a really long time, that palette was sold out and they were not restocking it. But now they have it available, and to be honest, I'm only waiting for a sale to be able to purchase it. I think back in spring in the US, they have like a 30% off sale, and I don't know why I didn't purchase it, but I'm waiting for a similar sale to be able to buy this one. And next to that palette, I really wanted the Metropolis palette too. But again, it's a really expensive palette for me in this moment of my life. So for me, the solution will be to get the Alter Ego dupe. But I don't know, the dupe for the Metropolis palette, it's a little bit more expensive than the dupe from the gold palette. And it's a little bit too big. So to be honest, I'm not sure. This is a palette that I don't know if I will purchase or not. But it's so pretty. Okay, let's move on to an indie brand, and from Glamlight, I really want the ice cream palette. Why? If I have said a million times that I don't want any big palettes, that I don't want another rainbow palette, why do I want this palette so badly? Probably it's because it's not just a rainbow palette. It's a pastel rainbow palette and the colors look so pretty. And it doesn't matter that I don't use colorful eyeshadows that often anymore, but I look at this palette and it's like, oh, I need it. This is another palette that I'm pretty sure that I'm going to purchase at some point. At the beginning, I wasn't interested when I saw this palette, but the more I look at this palette, the more I want it, especially the last 3 rows that are the pastels basically. They're so pretty. I want this palette. Okay, let's move to a high-end brand again, and now we have Sigma. I have one palette from Sigma. I have the Enchanted Palette, but another Sigma palette that I really, really want is the, how are you called? Cor de Rosa? Something like that. And it's so pretty. It's pink, but it's neutral, and that for me right now it's just perfect because I love pinks, I love purples, but I don't want bright pinks anymore. I want something subtle. So I really want this palette, but again, to get this palette to my country, it's super expensive. I was super lucky to be able to get the Enchanted palette for like 40-45 US dollars. But for me to try to purchase this from the website, because the Sigma is not available on my country, only the brushes are available. But to try to get this palette will be like 70 US dollars or 80 plus the taxes and customs, and that will be like over $100 for one palette. And I'm not willing to pay that, but someday I'm going to get this palette. Someday. Okay, with this next palette, I just can't cry over it because it's not available anymore. It was a limited edition and I didn't get it. And I kind of regret it. And that is the Angie collaboration palette with Kaleidos Cosmetics. And this palette, it's so pretty. I was this close to get it like 3 times, but I didn't get it because, let's be honest, especially the first row of this palette, it's all blues and greens, and those are not the colors that I use, but it's so pretty. And I have seen so many people loving this palette that I regret not getting it, and now it's gone forever, and I'm sad about that. I don't know why it is with this palette that I want so badly. I think it's the shimmers and the multichromes and the purples and mauves and even the blues. I want everything of this palette now. I know I wouldn't have gotten so much use out of it because these are not my colors, but I would love to have this palette on my collection. Okay, the next one is another one that I just can't cry over it because again, it was a limited edition. I didn't get it. And I feel like it would have been such a good palette for me. And that is the Too Faced Pumping Pumpkin Spice Palette. This was the holiday release from last year, and when I first saw it, I wasn't interested, but then I started seeing swatches and people using it, and I was crazy about it. But I tried to buy it here in my country because it was available, but when I tried to buy it, it was already sold out on my country and I wasn't able to get it. And that was so sad. This was going to be my first high-end palette, and this would have been the perfect palette for me to try Too Faced, because I want to try that brand, but for some reason their palettes are not really calling me. But this palette was perfect. Again, it's a neutral palette, but has some pinks, some purples, a little bit of green. It was so pretty. I was hoping that the palette from the holidays this year was going to be pretty too, but I find that palette so boring. It's like just a neutral palette with a pop of purple and pink. Okay, the next palette, I think I might get them, but I don't think so. Both are from the Anastasia Beverly Hills brand. And let's start with the one that it's easier for me to get, and that is the Norbina palette, the OG Norbina. And it's so pretty, but when I saw it in store, it wasn't as pretty as I thought it was going to be for the photos that I have seen. But for some reason I'm still drawn to this palette. But the main reason that I'm saying that I probably won't get this palette is because I have the Norbina volume 4 and 5, and there are a lot of colors that are similar with this palette. But I don't know, I still look at this palette and it looks so pretty. The perfect neutral purple and pink palette. And this one is way smaller than the Norbinas, so I kind of want this palette, but I know I won't get it because I have these shades. And the other Anastasia palette that I want, it's the Sultry palette. But this one again was a limited edition from like Christmas 2018 or something like that, maybe 2019. And I have a dupe from this palette and it's a pretty good dupe, but everyone says that this is their favorite Anastasia palette, and that got me because I want to try that, but it's not available, and the only way to get it is buying the bold, but that is a lot of money that I don't want to spend. Okay, we have 3 more brands to talk about, so let's try to move a little bit faster. First, I want to talk about another low-cost brand, and this is the Roaring 20s collection from Root Cosmetics. This collection has 3 palettes. I leave the pictures over here. One of them is neutral, the other one is colorful, and the third one is a neon palette. And I want these palettes. I've been trying to convince myself that I don't want them. I don't think I'm going to purchase any of these palettes, but every time that I look at them, it's like, oh my god, I want those. First, we have the neutral palette, and as you can see in the picture, it's a pink neutral palette. It's just perfect. So I really want that one. And the colorful one, I think it's called Reckless. It's so pretty. The colors look so vibrant. But again, I know that I don't need that. And the last one is a neon palette, and for me looks like the perfect neon palette because it has some oranges, but the purples especially and the shimmers are the one that call me the most. So these are 3 palettes from the brand that I've been wanting for a really long time. I've even dreamed about this palette like a year ago, and I was this close to purchase the 2 first palettes, the neutral and the colorful one, but I didn't. I ended up getting another palette, and I kind of regret not getting those palettes at that time. That was like a year ago, because now I feel like I have too much to buy these palettes, but at that time it would have been perfect. Let's move on to our last high-end palette, and that is from Pat McGrath. I really want to try the Pat McGrath formula, and there is a palette that is kind of easy for me to get, and that is the Rose Decadence palette. This is a 6-pan palette and it looks so pretty. It's not one of the like big super expensive palettes. It doesn't have any of the special shades from the brand, but I feel like it will be a nice palette to know the brand and not spending a lot of money on it. Okay, and the last palettes that I want to talk are kind of an honorable mention because these are not even available yet. They're supposed to release like in 2 days or something like that, and are from Beauty Creations, and they announced that they were going to launch some Halloween palettes, and I love the idea. But then they release it, and these palettes are huge. They have like 35 eyeshadows, and I will have loved this palette if they would have been smaller, like a 12 or 15 pan palette, but they are just too big. The ones I'm thinking that I want are the more gray blue one and the one that has the pastels. But to be honest, if I end up getting the ice cream palette, I will need the pastel one, and the other one is just too big. These palettes are just too big. If they would have been smaller, I would have purchased them, to be honest. But they're too big. I don't want to add another 70 eyeshadow pans on my collection. I'm trying to get my pan percentage higher since I declutter most of my pans. So yeah, I'm not going to get that, but I've been thinking about that. And even if I know it's too big, I'm still thinking about that. But yeah, that's everything for today. And this video was so long, it's going to be so hard to edit. But I hope you enjoyed it. This was something different. I never have done something like that, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, please consider subscribing. I will love that. And I hope I'll see you in the next one. Bye!